And yeah, it's not bad. I mean, you could go in here and write a bunch of unit tests for a bunch of code with this, but I don't know if you would want to because one, the reporting mechanism is not that easy to read. Could you imagine if you had like 20 tests fail and this was like what you pulled open times 20 inside of a log file on your server somewhere? Like this would be terrible. Or in the CI on GitHub, you wouldn't want to see this. It'd be really hard to parse through. So the reporting is bad. And it just really wasn't that flexible. What if we, like right now, I don't have like any formatting up here about what I'm actually testing, like what piece of unit, and then what I'm testing that unit for. Like I logged it here so we can see it, but it doesn't really stand out, so it's really hard to see. And I don't really get any indication of like how many tests I ran, how long the test took to run, how many failed, how many passed, just like the statistics on that. That's not saying we can't make it. Like using the assert lib module, like we could totally make all that stuff. But again, why would you reinvent the wheel when there's already good stuff out there? So we're going to use one of those things, and there's so many of them, and they pretty much all have been piggybacking on a really popular one called Jasmine. I think that was the first one that really kind of took this approach. So Jasmine came out a long time ago, and then Mocha came out and sat on top of that, and that was my tool of choice for a long time. But now everyone's kind of converging on a tool called Jest, Jest, and that's what we're going to use. We're going to use Jest, again, created by Facebook. They seem to just be on a roll with this open source JavaScript stuff, right? So let's do that. Let's install some Jest. So we'll say npm install Jest, but we're going to say save dev and not save. That's because Jest is going to be a dev dependency. So a dev dependency is exactly like a dependency, but it's meant to be for development, as in it is not, your app does not depend on Jest being installed for it to operate. If Jest was not installed in this application, the add function would still do what it's supposed to do because it doesn't import Jest, it doesn't use Jest. Jest consumes our app, so therefore it's a dev dependency. Our app doesn't need to, when our app is executed by the node interpreter, it's not going to include Jest, it doesn't need it, so it's a dev dependency. And the reason that's important is because when you deploy or you publish to NPM and someone's pulling in your code, they don't need your dev dependencies because they're never going to run tests, they're never going to run the build script. It should have already been built and you should have already tested it. So you don't want to ship those extra dependencies on someone's machine. Same thing if you're deploying. If you already built inside of a CI or something like that, you don't need a lot of those dependencies to be sitting up there, so don't even install them. So dev dependencies just basically give you another Boolean to install on. So you can tell npm, install just the dependencies, or install just the dev dependencies, or install all the dependencies. So it really just depends on how you want to do it. It's just another flag that you can, basically Boolean off on when you do an install. All right, so now that we have Jest, we can switch this over. Actually, we'll leave this one and we'll just write some better tests. That way we can kind of compare. So we'll write some more code here. I'm going to open up a new file, and I'm going to call this one utils dot. And I'm actually going to do a JS here. I know we said we're going to do MJS this whole time, so this might be confusing. But as of right now, the current version of Jest does not support MJS files out of the box without some type of configuration that I think is a little out of scope of this exercise, so I don't want to cover that. But the next version of Jest that you can install, which is beta, does support it with some small configuration, but I also didn't want to inflate and confuse anyone with that configuration. So we're just going to switch to JS and use common JS for the course of Jest. But that's not going to determine how you use Jest. It's still going to work exactly the same. It's just determining what type of modules we can use. So we'll be using common JS here for Jest, so bear with me. I do have some code though that I want to test. So we're gonna go grab that code. It's really not doing anything. And it is this code right here. So here's the code that we're gonna test. I'm literally just gonna copy and paste it because this is not the important part. The important part is the test that we're writing. So I'm gonna paste that in here. And just to go through it so we kind of know what we're doing. I have a delay function up here that I'm using just to simulate asynchronous program. We won't be testing that. I have a users array that's basically a database. And then the two functions that we will be testing will be the get new user function, which is asynchronous. It's an asynchronous function that queries the database for a user that has this ID. And it tries to, if it doesn't see that user, it'll throw an error. If it does, it'll return the user. The other function that we will be testing is going to be map object to array. It takes an object and a callback, and it basically maps over that object and puts all the results inside of an array. So those are the two functions we will be testing with Jest. So now I'm going to make a new test file here, and I'm going to call this utils.test, or you can even say spec. I like spec.js, like that. And we can get started by writing some tests. So the sweet thing about writing tests with something like Jest is how we're going to execute this. And that's really important because it means we don't really have to import a lot of stuff. So what I'm saying is if we head over to the package.json, which I don't have, I need to actually create that. So I'm just going to say npm init like that. There we go. And what's crazy is that even though I created the package.json later after I already installed, you can see npm was smart enough to add the dependencies that I had. It wasn't too smart. It put Jest in the dependencies and not the dev dependencies. But there's no way it could have known that it was a dev dependency when it wasn't here already. So it kind of got there. I should have init before I installed, but you know, it is what it is. So the sweet thing is we can just hijack this test command, and we can just put Jest here like that. And because we're executing the Jest test in the Jest environment with the Jest CLI, we don't have to actually import any of the stuff that Jest has. It's just injected to us globally because it's executed in the Jest context, which is really cool. So what does that actually mean? Well, let's write some tests. So typically what you do when you write a test in something like Jest is you import the code you want to test. So in this example, I want to import from utils. Oh, I'm sorry, can't do that. We got to do this one. We got to do some require stuff. I want to import from utils. And I want to get new user and then map object to array. So we got that. And then what you would normally do here is you would do something called describe. And you can see it tried to autocomplete from yargs. I don't want the yargs one. I want the Jest one. And typically the way describe is like you're describing the piece of code that you're about to test. In this case, let's test the map object to array first. So map object to array. And I'm gonna do that to let you know that it's a function. So we're gonna test that. This is what we're describing. And then each thing that we want to test, each assertion, if I must, we write a test function for it, not to be confused with. You can see it tried to include the test global from Jest, which is the same thing, but we don't need to do that because it's injected for us. So now we can say test, and then I can actually write, like, what do I want to test? Well, let's look at the code. I want to, here. I want to make sure that this puts the, I want to make sure that it calls, no, I want to make sure that it actually just does what it's supposed to do. It returns an array of all the map values. So I'm going to pass it something, and then I'm going to see what the output is. And if it doesn't match, it didn't do its job. So either the code is wrong or my test is wrong, and we'll have to figure it out. So I'm going to test that it maps values to array using callback. So that's what we're going to test. And then now what we can do is we can say results equals map object to array. I'm going to pass in an object, and we'll call it, you know, this is a food order. So like, was there a shake? Yes. Did we have fries and were they good? No. And was it fast? Yes. So we have these objects here. We want to map them to an array. So if my code is doing what I think it's doing, well, I guess now I got to pass in a callback. Let's do that. Let's do a callback over here. So if we do a callback, I can take each one of these. It should be like a K and a V here, a key and a value. And I'll just basically, actually, this is not a good one. Let's do some numbers here. Numbers will be better to test. Let's say age 30, height 65, whatever. So we got that. So now if I map over these and I say return value times, or value plus 10. There we go. So I should get back an array of two things, and it should say like 40 and 75. So that's what I expect. So I'm going to say expect, which is another global from Jest. You can see it try to auto import. I don't need it. So I can say expect result. And then I can say to equal. And I want to do equal because I'm about to compare two arrays that are two different arrays in memory but have the same value. So to equal is a deep equality check and not a exact match. If I want to do an exact match, I would say to be. And that would say, is this array exactly this array? And that's not what we want. We just want to make sure they got the same values. So I'm going to say it should be an array of 40 and 75. So let's try that. So now what we can do is we can run the npm tests. I think we're going to get an issue because we have this other test file here. I'm going to just get rid of this right quick so it doesn't interfere. Or I'll just rename it. Let me just not put a spec in there. There we go. So now I can just say npm test. And you can see Jest says, cool, this passed this file. Here's what you were testing. Here's the actual test. Check mark means it passed. One passed of all the test suites. One total tests. Snapshots, what they were already snapshots, what we're not doing. And just how long it took in general. And then it ran all test suites. So as you can see, the output is just a lot better. If you can imagine just a bunch of these with green check marks on them or red X's if they failed, it's just a lot easier to see and visualize than anything else. So it's not that like it's doing anything different. It's just, one, it gives us a better output. And two, it's a little easier to develop with, in my opinion. Although assert's really not that bad. It's just, there's a lot of setup here that I had to do. Whereas Jest, yeah, there's a lot of ceremony with the describe and the test, but I think it's necessary ceremony. It kind of works. So that's how you would write just a basic test here. We can move on to doing something like a spy. So for instance, we know that we have to pass in a callback here, but I want to test to make sure that the callback actually gets called. I'm not sure that if it gets called, I want to make sure that it does. So callback gets called. So we'll do this. And we'll just copy this right here. But before, I'm not going to actually add this callback here. I don't really care what the callback does. I'm just going to call this a mock callback. And I'm going to make that. So const mock callback is going to be just dot function. So that's just going to create a mock callback. And as you can see, I'm using this Jest keyword here. That's also injected into the global space because we're running it in the Jest runtimes. Pretty amazing. So now I can say expect mock callback it's like expect mock callback dot, what is it? I can't remember. I have it here in my test. We want to see, oh yeah, mock callback dot mock dot calls. There we go. It's so hard to keep up with. So dot mock dot calls dot length to be, well, I know this callback is going to run for as many key value pairs as in this object. Right now there's 2, so it should be 2. It should have been called twice. So I'm going to check that out to see if that works. But let's make this fail so we can see what happens. So let's make that fail. And you can see right there, we got a fail on map objects to array. Callback gets called. That failed. Expected 33, but received 2. And you can see where it colors that. So here's the expected, and here's what it actually got. And it even points to like where you wrote the code. And then you get all this really cool stuff. So it's really great how this works. So now you would go back like, well, no, this test is right. It should have been called 33 times. So now the code is wrong. But more realistically, it looks like my test is wrong. So obviously I would change that to 2. And now my test will work. So now we get all these green check marks, which is like the best feeling. It's so good when you do a pull request and the CI says you're good to go with all those green check marks. It feels so good because then like you'll be out, you'll like do a PR and then you'll walk away. You go like fix a grilled cheese and then you'll look at your Slack from the bot that messaged you, and it says your test failed, and you're just like, dang, I can't even eat this grilled cheese now, because you know everyone's going to hit you up. You got to do a rollback or whatever. So it's just really nice to see those green check marks.